I'm going to be honest here. This isn't something I've normally ever done. In fact, it's completely new to me. But about a year ago, I started listening to My Hero Academia What Ifs and Dragon Ball What Ifs. Mostly from those two stories specifically. I started recently listening to Pokemon What Ifs, and I found that interesting that people came up with their own unique and creative ideas for what could have happened if things played out differently for certain characters. And so, yeah, this is my attempt at doing a what if story for My Hero Academia. And, yeah, it's what if Deku was a Transformer? Or what if Izuku Midoriya was a Transformer? I'm probably going to put Izuku Midoriya. But, a lot of you are probably wondering how I'm going to do this. Well, I'm kind of I'm doing this unscripted entirely. Mostly because I'm good at coming up with stuff on the fly for story-wise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working on my own series right now. But you guys on YouTube probably don't know much about that, so I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, who, I mean, how am I going to give Izuku Midoriya a Transformer quirk, or make him into a Transformer? Well, first off, he's not going to have a specific, like, vehicle mode. He can turn to different vehicle modes, and whatever vehicle mode he used last, his body will have those parts and will also change in size. He can also shrink down to a normal human size so that he's not, um, what's the word? Yeah, so he's not like bigger than everybody and causing problems with his size. Because if you don't know, Transformers in Generation 1 had the ability called mass shifting where they could actually change their size, usually when they transform. A good example of this was Soundwave when he would turn to a cassette player and he'd be like that big when he was in cassette player form, but when he was in robot mode, he'd be the full size of what he's supposed to be. But anyway, what is he gonna look like? Because if he's gonna have a Transformers quirk, it's obviously gonna make it so that he has a different look to himself, like a mutation quirk. Well, for starters, this is what he looks like. I haven't colored this picture yet, but this is a picture I drew of him as a Transformer. And yes, I kept the hair because technically he still is a human. He's not an alien. He just happens to look like a Transformer and has all the abilities of a Transformer. As for what he turns into, it's a motorbike. And if you're wondering where I came up with the idea, this design is actually referenced from Oil Slick from Transformers Animated. I have the figure. He's right there. He's in motorbike mode, so that's what his motorbike mode looks like, but just in his colors. So imagine this. So like it'll be like his hero suit, but it'll obviously be a Transformer instead. So like I obviously made these parts look like his gloves. Up here it looks like the two little white shoulder patches he has. Down here these are gonna be red, but so his eyes will be like green with like white dots in the middle for his irises and stuff. I'll get around to coloring it. I'll have it colored by the time I move on to the next part. But anyway, let's move on to the story. So for starters, when Izuku is born, he is born looking, well, like a robot. So imagine this, but without all the extra parts of the vehicle and a midget. I know I shouldn't be saying that, but just imagine tiny Izuku. Just imagine him being that big. Um, and so right off the bat, they assume his quirk has something to do um with his weird appearance. So Inko takes him to a quirk doctor. But when they get there, they have trouble figuring out what his quirk is, and so they decide to wait until Izuku's old enough to actually know what's going on around him so they know what to do. And so a few years pass, and Izuku, for the first time, figures out what his quirk is capable of doing. When his hand suddenly morphs into a pencil when he couldn't find his, when he's taking notes on a hero that he sees. And yes, Izuku would have done that by that time. I'm pretty sure that's about around the time he would have started doing that. And now, as for what happens is his hand turns into a pencil for him to write because he can't find one, and he thinks this is cool. He shows his mom, and her first instinct is to take him to the quirk doctor. So once she does, he's taken over, and when he's taken to the quirk doctor, he ends up working with the doctor, and the doctor finds out that he can change his hands and other parts of his body into different devices that he needs, even guns and weapons and stuff. But mostly, he's good at coming up with tools that he could use to get out of a situation, or that he could use to solve problems. And so they assume that's just all he can do, is that he has the ability to turn his hands into robotic hands and robotic devices and stuff, and that's why he looks like a robot. Um, but as Izuku is um just going through life like a normal kid, or a normal kid with a quirk, he and his best friend Katsuki, and he doesn't lose his best friend in this one, and thanks to Izuku being around, Bakugo doesn't get full ahead of himself and think that he's the best, but he still has that same old personality where he's like extremely angry all the time in everything he does. Um, and as they're just walking to the park, Izuku takes a look at a very old-looking motorbike, and this motorbike looks old because, well, if you know, then quirks are like the current time that Izuku lives in. It's like centuries from where we are right now. I think that's what it was. Anyway, um, so as he's looking at the bike, he's like able to figure out how it works and what it's made of, and he's seeing like all these weird boxes and like all these like kind of text boxes and stuff that are like labeling each thing as he's looking at it. So like imagine like how it looked when Jazz scanned his vehicle mode in the first Transformers Michael Bay movie. Um, just imagine it looking like that. But on the outs to his perspective, but on the outside, he's shooting a little green beam from his eyes to scan it. So kind of like in Transformers Animated. And Bakugo and several others noticed this, and at first they thought it was a laser beam, and Nizuku didn't know that he was doing it, but nothing happened to the bike. It wasn't destroyed or anything, so he didn't know what happened. Then, oh, excuse me. As Izuku begins to blink a few times, his body begins to shift, and unfortunately, this causes his clothes to tear because, well, massive shoulder pads and wheel hands, and those. Basically, what happens is his shoes, and his shirt just get destroyed when this happens because of the big handlebar things on his shoulders and the wheel hands. But of course, the wheel hands aren't going to mess with any clothes. He's not wearing any gloves at the moment. So, and this shocks Katsuki because not only did he change appearance, but he looked taller now. He was much taller than Katsuki. At this point, they were actually 6 years old. So Izuku is very much taller than Katsuki now, and it's because of the fact that he scanned this new form. So if I were to give you an exact height, let's say he's as tall as I am right now. I'm 5'4". Now, when he gets older, his form where he's in the bike mode will look much taller, like the size that Oil Slick is in the animated. By the time he's around 15 or 16 or whatever. And I need to turn that off because that is just going to keep playing that annoying music if I don't. There we go. Anyway, Katsuki didn't know what was going on, but he noticed that Izuku had wheels attached to his hands and wheels attached to his feet, like they were part of his feet. He also noticed that he had two handlebars sticking out of his shoulders. This at first was kind of jarring to him because he didn't know what happened. And he started asking his best friend, what happened? Why does he look so robotic? I mean, not robotic. Why does he look like he's got parts of the vehicle attached to him? Izuku doesn't know at first. And he just like brushes it off. Says maybe it's just my quirk doing weird things again. Maybe more than just my hands can turn into stuff when I look at it. And then Katsuki, being 6, of course he believes this he accepts this because once again they're 6. They're not going to really have that much knowledge on it quite yet. And then Katsuki says, "Race you to the park." So they start racing to the park. But what shocks everyone is as Izuku's running. He seemingly trips at first. That's what Katsuki thinks. But as he hits the ground, his body begins to transform into that bike form, into the same bike he just saw, except in his colors. And as Katsuki sees this, he's too shocked to even complain that Izuku's beating him because he can turn into a bike. And so when he gets to the park, um, Izuku thinks that Katsuki was right behind him, but he didn't actually realize that he transformed into a bike. But when he got there, and people saw a random random Harley bike just pull up and not have a driver on it, they were of course confused. And Izuku didn't realize it until someone pointed at him and said, "There's a ghost on that bike." And that's when he realized that he'd turned himself into the motorbike that he saw, and he didn't know what to do. And so he just thought of what he used to look like, and he transformed back into his regular form, except much taller. Eventually, Katsuki did make it to the park, but in the process, he was breathing really hard and just yelling at Izuku for leaving him in the dust. Of course, Izuku apologized, not really realizing that he actually turned into a motorbike. And realizing that maybe he could scan more vehicles, he tried it with some of the cars around him. Unfortunately, though, that gave him a headache, and he couldn't do it with the cars because they were too big. So that's the drawback of his quirk. Depending on the size of the vehicle, depends on what he can scan. Like in the show, every quirk has a drawback. And for him, he can't scan a vehicle until he reaches a certain age. So, for instance, say he wants to scan like a go-kart. He can scan that because it's small enough, and he can scan a motorbike because it's small enough. But if he wants to scan like a regular car or a regular truck, he has to wait until he's at least in the double digits when he's older. But as for like his vehicle modes, most of the time he's going to be in his motorcycle form because that would be his favorite one, and it would be the smallest one too. Eventually, he figures out how to shrink himself, so he's round back down to the size of what he's supposed to be. But when he gets home, he actually gives Katsuki a ride on him in motorbike form. And of course, not people that didn't see it aren't gonna know that he's using his quirk, and he's a little kid, so he's not gonna really think anything of it. So as he drives into the parking lot with Katsuki on top of him, or sorry, that sounds weird. Riding him in motorbike form still sounds weird. Let's just say with Katsuki as his passenger in bike form. As he pulls up to the apartment that he lives in, Inko sees this and sees Katsuki just on some weird green motorbike, but he doesn't seem to be actually controlling it. So Inko goes down to ask him where Izuku is, and before her eyes, Izuku transforms back to his regular self. And of course, this shocks Inko, realizing that maybe his quirk is something more than what it was supposed to be. And so she takes him to the quirk doctor again, only for them to realize that he can scan if he focuses on a vehicle for enough amount of time, he'll scan the vehicle and be able to turn into it. But he's not able to actually scan vehicles that are bigger than his limit. And right now, his current limit is things that are. Let's see, and yes, he can turn into other things too, not just vehicles. But he has to scan that. So let's see, how should I go about this? So his current limit for size would be, say, so those Japanese cars, the ones that are kind of like small and they can only carry 2 people in them. Those things. That's his current limit. Is he can only turn into that. That's as big as he can go. Anyway, so he starts going around and scanning whatever he can to see if he can turn into it. He scans multiple different appliances. He scans a boombox. If I had a figure for Blaster or a Twin Cast, I'd show you them, but I don't have either one. So, and eventually he found something interesting, and one day he started scanning a living creature. He was scanning a bird. This bird happened to be a peregrine falcon. I don't know if peregrine falcons can be found in Japan. I'm just kind of like saying it looks kind of like that. And yeah, if you're a Transformers fan, you know where I'm going with this. So he got a new form, which is an organic form. And this form happened to be, well, a falcon-like creature. So just kind of imagine Air Razor, the person right there with the orange and gray in front of Megatron and next to a Bumblebee. Imagine her, but like in Nezuko's colors and more masculine, more a male figure-ish body instead of a female. I mean, I know in Japan that Airazor is technically a guy, but in America here, she's a girl. So anyway, and when Inko and Katsuki and everybody else that he knew found out about this, this was interesting because a robot being able to turn into an organic creature. Now, of course, Izuku was still looked like a robot, but like a robotic bird when he turned into that. Um, but eventually, things kept going on as normal. Um, Katsuki didn't really change, but then there came the whole time where uh where they're talking about what school they want to go to, and when all the students find out that both Katsuki and Izuku want to go to UA, um, of course the kids are unsure that that's going to actually work out for them because it's UA, but Katsuki and Izuku simply say, "You just got to work hard and make sure you earn your place. If we don't earn our place, then we can just go to another school." Because unlike in the original timeline, both Katsuki and Izuku, um, they want to be heroes, but they're not gonna like give it up so easy just after losing um a spot in UA if they do lose it. Anyway, so as they're going home, Izuku and Akatsuki go through this tunnel, and what they don't realize is there is, of course, the sludge villain, and we all know what happens with the sludge villain. He tries to capture Izuku, but since they're both there, Izuku is actually able to transform into his motorcycle form, and Akatsuki jumps on, and they get out of there as fast as they can. Of course, the slime villain tries to give chase, but by the time he reaches the end of the cave to finally catch up to them, because like Izuku and Katsuki just once they left the cave, they just started running by normal standards. That's when the sludge villain was caught by All Might. And of course, Katsuki and Izuku are both freaking out because All Might is still their favorite hero. And of course, All Might is happy to meet a new fan. So he simply gives them both an autograph, and then he leaps away. Unlike in the original timeline, Izuku's not bullied, so of course he doesn't feel the need to ask All Might if he could be a hero when everybody else knows how powerful he is at the moment. Um, and let's see. It you got to give me a second. Sometimes I got to actually go through my memories to see what's supposed to come next in the My Hero Academia story. I haven't binge watched the entire series in a while, so let's see. And unfortunately, there is one side effect I have. I think this might be my quirk. If I talk for too long, I start getting a headache. Like I'm getting a little migraine right now. My throat's also getting dry, but nothing I can do about that. I mean, that happens to everybody. Anyway, so they continue on their way home, but then something happens and they see a commotion going on. The sludge villain had escaped All Might, like in the original. He loses the water bottle. I'm just gonna say it's not from Midoriya. It's not Midoriya's fault this time. Um, and when they see the sludge villain, of course they don't know how he escaped All Might, but they notice that there's somebody being held captive by the sludge villain, and this person. Let's see, who shall I have this person be? Which one of the characters? Let's say this person is Shinzo from Hitoshi Shinzo, the guy with the brainwashing quirk, because I actually want him to actually be in the hero course in this What If, because that guy was done dirty. Like one of the coolest characters, and I know he doesn't ever show up that much, but he's still a really cool character. Um. Anyway, so it's Hitoshi Shinzo, and of course the sludge villain was just getting desperate at this moment and just grabbed whoever he could. And seeing this, both Katsuki and Izuku both rushed out to go and help, with Izuku turning into his motorcycle form and Katsuki jumping on to get there faster along with him. And they both started attacking the sludge villain, with Izuku transforming his hands into guns. Well, one of his hands into guns. The other one he turned into Bumblebee's like stinger thing that he has an animated. Well, not the animated one specifically. Um, I have a feeling that if it was the animated one, then and because that one is meant for like shooting. If he shot the sludge villain, it would hurt Hitoshi, and of course, Izuku would know that. So it's the version from Cyberverse where just like he touches him with it and it freezes him. So he does that and uses that kind of stinger and hits the sludge villain, stopping his motion. And then he reaches in and pulls Hitoshi out. And when he does this, several heroes witness how quick they were able to pull that off because of how big Izuku, much bigger Izuku was than the sludge villain. At this point, when he goes into like his full robot form, he's bigger than the sludge villain because, like I said, he's 15 now or 14 at this point. So he's pretty big now, and he's able to scan bigger vehicle modes. So as he pulls them out, All Might comes in and finishes off the sludge villain with, of course, the Detroit Smash that he always does. And upon this happening, All Might is cheered on. Some of the pros come over, and they start reprimanding Bakugo and Izuku for rushing out there when there were plenty of pros around that were not doing anything. Anyway, and this is exactly what Izuku brings up. He's like, if there were so many pros around, then why don't you get in there and do something about it? And Bakugo was not any better. He was really fuming at the fact that a bunch of pros were too focused on what their weaknesses were or like no cameras in the area to witness what they were doing. And then Izuku brings up that the only person who was actually doing his job right was Backdraft, because let's be honest, in that scene in the show, Backdraft was the only one who was well. Kamui Woods was doing good stuff too, but he could have easily gone back to go and help. But Backdraft was like already. The only reason I don't get the only reason I don't think he was in the wrong is because he was in the middle of putting out fire, so he was already preoccupied with doing something else. Anyway, and of course the pros start getting angry at this because they're getting called out by two kids. But Izuku and Bakugo had enough, and they tell Shinzo to come with them. And so as they head out, they're on their way home, and they've invited Shinzo to come hang out with them because he's clearly somebody who's had it kind of rough, considering the fact that he's made fun of for the fact that his quirk is quote unquote villainous. But while they're on their way, All Might comes and catches them at the right time, and of course, to their shock, he turns into his skinny form, and they've never seen this before. They're like, "What the heck happened to you?" And Bakugo thinks that it's an imposter. Izuku, of course, because he's like got a robotic look to him, and because he can scan stuff, he scans All Might, like not to transform into him, but scans him to check his vitals, and it is All Might. And of course, this is bothering Izuku because what could have happened to All Might that made him so weak? And All Might goes through the whole spiel of how he tells that both Izuku and Katsuki were very heroic in trying to go save Shinzo, even though they didn't have a license and they shouldn't have, but they did it because it was the right thing to do, and all the heroes were just standing by. And so he offers the one for all to Izuku or Katsuki. He asks them to decide, but both of them deny. Because, for one, Izuku already has a powerful quirk, and so does Katsuki. And so they want Shinzo to take it, because Shinzo wants to be a hero, just like they do. And obviously for a good reason too. His quirk could be used in many different ways. And All Might asks Shinzo a few questions to find out if he's worthy, and he is. So, and because Shinzo obviously hasn't done any training, that was obvious in the sports festival. He went down pretty easily after Izuku broke out of his mind control. So he tells the three of them to meet him at the Dagobah Beach or whatever it's called to clean it up. And most of the work is going to be done by Shinzo because the other two have already done quite a bit of work, and Izuku's literally a giant robot who could lift all that trash no problem. But so as they get there, they of course go through the whole training thing, and Izuku and Katsuki help them out. And with their help, eventually they manage to get the whole thing cleaned, and they still have 2 months left to spare before the entrance exam. And so when All Might goes to give Shinzo his quirk, of course they're freaked out because they gotta eat his hair, eat this and all that. I mean, Shinzo's gotta eat his hair. And when he does, then All Might goes on to tell him how to use the power, and tells him to basically clench his butt cheeks and yell from the depths of his heart to say smash. And both Katsuki and Izuku are looking at him like, what kind of method for using your quirk is that? And they're confused. So Shinzo does this and ends up breaking all the bones in his right arm. And without any more hesitation, All Might then grabs Shinzo and carries him to UA faster than Deku or Katsuki could see, and immediately Deku transforms into his motorbike form with Katsuki jumping on, and they start heading in that direction too. Of course, they're stuck waiting outside though, because they can't really get in without the UA, without like an ID card or something. But of course, Recovery Girl gets after All Might for giving him such a terrible for like having him use 100% right off the bat, and being such a terrible teacher. And of course, we all know that All Might is, for some reason, doesn't give Izuku the whole details on how to use One for All in the actual story. But then again, that could be just because, he lacks the common sense to actually tell him what he does, or he doesn't really know how to describe it. Anyway, so a couple days later, Shinzo's back at the beach with Katsuki and Izuku, and they're trying to figure out how a better way to use One for All. And as they're trying to figure this out, Katsuki is nearby practicing with his quirk, while Izuku's going through like his whole muttering spiel about how to use One for All. And while he's doing this, unbeknownst to him, his the parts of his body are kind of like shifting around and stuff, and like all over his body. And Shinzo notices this, and he thinks to himself, and he says to Izuku, "Do you know that your body's doing that?" And Izuku looks down at himself. He says, "Oh, sorry, my entire body does that when I start really thinking, and my parts just start shifting around." And that's when it comes to Shinzo. He could use it throughout his entire body, but he clearly can't use all of a full on 100%, or else he'd break his entire body. And so he starts charging up One for All, up until he starts to feel slight amounts of pain, and then lowers the percentage a little bit to where he can wield 3% at the moment. The reason I say 3% is because, remember, Izuku was doing that by himself in the original continuity, and so he was able to wield 5% of full cowling once he got the hang of it. But Shinzo didn't have Shinzo had help besides himself, and it was done in a shorter amount of time. But thanks to the fact that they can actually train with this, and and also the lightning around Shinzo is like a magenta color. The reason for this is because Izuku's is like a light green, and I just think it'd be cool to have it be like a lighter purple. Anyway, not only does One for All actually end up giving him a power boost, but it gives him like a more powerful version of his quirk. So instead of him having to actually have someone respond to him when he uses his quirk, all he has to do is make sure that well, let me see. I actually have to think about this now. Give me a second. Okay, I got it. So instead of them having to respond verbally to him, if they respond to anything he does at all, it gives him an opening for him to brainwash them. And not only can he brainwash them, but only he can break his control of them. But there is, of course, still one drawback, and it's a new drawback. Instead of the person having to actually take a bit of damage or take a hit from something to break the control, the more he holds control over someone, the more he gets like a headache, and it costs a bit of and the more people he's controlling, the more harder it is. But he can control more than one person now. He can also purposely input thoughts or input permanent things into their head that will just affect them and personality wise. He actually uses this multiple times to mess with Katsuki. For instance, making him think he's a chicken. Anyway, so as they are training, eventually Shinzo is able to use 10% by the time they're it's time for the entrance exam. And so, and of course, the reason behind this is because he's battling two people who've had plenty of experience training with each other, and one of them is a giant robot. So, anyway, once they get to UA and get ready to go to the auditorium to take the first part of this exam, after that's all said and done, all three of them get like a pretty good score. Shinzo's score being lower than the other two because Katsuki and Izuku are crazy smart, even though Katsuki's like literally the human version of Wrath from Ben 10. Anyway, but more hostile. Anyway, when they get to the exam where President Mike's explaining the robots and everything, of course, unlike in the original timeline when President Mike asks everyone how they're doing, both Katsuki and Izuku shout out. Shinzo doesn't because Shinzo's quiet. He doesn't like talking very much. And President Mike points up at them and says, "I like your style. You guys should be more like them." Anyway, while President Mike is going on, Izuku, unknowing to everyone, unbeknownst to himself, but like to everybody else, he's muttering to himself again about how cool President Mike is. And this is the time where Ida gets up and starts talking about how the zero pointer is not there, or like the fourth robot is not there. And he turns around to go and berate Izuku for muttering under his breath, but is instantly stopped when Katsuki holds up a hand to stop him and says, "That's just a bad habit. You'll have to get used to that if you end up in the same class as him." And Izuku still has no idea what's going on, but Tenya realizes what's going on and stops talking, and apologizes to President Mike for interrupting. And now we get to the part where they're all on the buses, and my brother is calling me. I'll have to call him back. And as this is going on, they end up both Shinzo and Izuku are on the same bus because they don't go to the same school, but they're still friends. So as they're in this getting ready for the training field, that's where we're gonna end it. Sorry, guys. Next time, if you enjoy this story and where it's going, like the video, subscribe. I will see you for the next one.